The thunderous rattle of gunfire echoed across the desert training range of Camp Leatherneck like a violent storm, kicking up clouds of dust that hung in the scorching Afghan air. Inside the fortified command post, First Lieutenant Olivia Reeves clutched a stack of operations reports against her chest, her badge reading Administrative Support in bold, impersonal letters. The paperwork trembled slightly in her hands as she watched the Marine combat instructors bark orders at recruits, struggling with their weapons in the blistering heat. Not one of those men knew that the quiet woman they dismissed as just office staff had once been the top marksman in her entire officer candidate class, before a bureaucratic mistake and systematic bias had buried her talents beneath mountains of paperwork and forgotten potential. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Camp Leatherneck Forward Operating Base sprawled across the harsh Helmand Province landscape like a dusty, fortified city. The summer heat had transformed the base into a shimmering mirage of metal, concrete, and canvas, where even the air conditioning units struggled against nature's furnace. The scent of gun oil, diesel fuel, and military-issue sunscreen hung heavy in the recycled air of the command center. Olivia made her way through the maze of tactical operations stations, her olive-drab uniform crisp, despite the oppressive heat. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a tight regulation bun, and her green eyes reflected the dancing lights of the tactical displays that dominated the room. She'd been on base for 18 months, and in that time, she'd learned to navigate the complex social hierarchy of a Marine Corps combat outpost, a hierarchy that placed administrative officers somewhere between furniture and decorative plants. "Sir, I have the after-action reports from yesterday's training exercise," she said, approaching Major Davis, the battalion's operations officer. Davis was hunched over a tactical map with Captain Reynolds and Master Sergeant Thompson, their fingers tracing routes through contested territory. "Just leave them on the desk, Lieutenant," Major Davis replied without looking up. "We'll get to them when we have time." "Sir, if I may," Olivia persisted, "I noticed some discrepancies in the engagement patterns compared to previous exercises. The insurgent tactics seem to be—" "Lieutenant Reeves," Major Davis cut her off, finally turning to face her. His expression wasn't unkind, just disinterested. "We appreciate your efficiency with the paperwork, but tactical analysis is better left to combat officers." Captain Reynolds smirked. "The Major's right, Reeves. Those reports are mostly for headquarters anyway. Nobody actually reads them." Olivia felt her cheeks flush, but years of dealing with dismissive superior officers had taught her to maintain her composure. "Yes, sir. I'll leave them here." She placed the stack of papers on the corner of the desk and turned to leave. "Oh, and Lieutenant," Major Davis called after her, "we need the supply requisitions processed by 1600. The convoy leaves at dawn tomorrow." "Yes, sir," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the familiar sting of being treated like a glorified secretary rather than a commissioned officer of the United States Marine Corps. As she walked away, she heard Master Sergeant Thompson mutter, "Why do they even send admin officers to forward combat posts? All they do is get in the way and use up resources." Captain Reynolds chuckled. "Base quota, I guess. Gotta have a certain number of female officers on the books, even if they're just pushing papers." The words weren't meant for her ears, but in the acoustically efficient command center, they carried just far enough. Olivia kept walking, her back straight, her face expressionless. She'd heard worse in her 5 years of service. Back in her small office, little more than a converted storage room with a desk and filing cabinet, Olivia sat down and opened her laptop. The supply requisitions could wait a few minutes. She pulled up the after-action reports she'd just delivered and began cross-referencing them with intelligence reports from the past 3 months. There was a pattern forming, one that concerned her deeply. The insurgent fighters had been gradually changing their tactics during training exercises, probing for weaknesses in standard Marine response procedures. It wasn't random. It was methodical, as though they were testing specific scenarios. But every time she tried to bring it up, she was politely but firmly redirected to her administrative duties. "I was top of my class in intelligence operations at OCS, sir," she replied. "But there was a mix-up with my MOS assignment, and by the time it was discovered, the training slots for the fiscal year had been filled. I was told I could either accept an administrative position or wait another year for reassignment. And you chose to serve where you could. the colonel finished for her. Commendable. He handed the report back to her. Unfortunately, Lieutenant, Major Davis is correct about one thing. We have operations to prepare for. I'll review this more thoroughly when I have time. Thank you, sir, Olivia said, trying to hide her disappointment. It was more consideration than she usually received, but still not enough to make a difference. As she turned to leave, Colonel Mitchell added, "And Lieutenant? Good initiative." It wasn't much, but it was the first genuine acknowledgement of her abilities she'd received since arriving at Camp Leatherneck. Olivia returned to her office with a slightly lighter step, though she harbored no illusions that anything would change. The next day dawned with the usual oppressive heat. Olivia was at her desk by 0500, processing the final paperwork for the supply convoy scheduled to depart at 0700. The base was already humming with activity, as Marines prepared for what promised to be another brutally hot day of operations. At 0645, just as she was finishing the last of the convoy documentation, a series of explosions rocked the base. The building shook, dust raining down from the ceiling tiles. Instinctively, Olivia dove under her desk, her training taking over despite years of administrative duty. The base alarm system wailed to life, followed by the staccato reports of small arms fire. This wasn't a drill. Camp Leatherneck was under attack. Olivia emerged from under her desk and moved quickly to the door of her office. The corridor outside was filled with Marines rushing to battle stations. She grabbed her sidearm from her desk drawer and attached the holster to her belt, then joined the flow of personnel heading toward the command center. The scene inside the Tactical Operations Center was controlled chaos. Colonel Mitchell stood at the central table, surrounded by his staff officers who were shouting updates from various sectors of the base. Primary communications are down. Ammunition depot in Sector 4 is under direct attack. We've got multiple breaches in the perimeter fence at grid coordinates Delta 6 and Echo 2. It was exactly the scenario Olivia had predicted in her report. A coordinated assault, targeting communications first, then ammunition storage. The insurgents had practiced this pattern in training exercises for months, and now they were executing the real thing. She pushed her way forward to the command table. "Sir," she said, addressing Colonel Mitchell directly, "this is the attack pattern I documented in my report. They're following the exact sequence I predicted." Major Davis glared at her. "Lieutenant, this is not the time for, I told you so, return to your station and await further orders." Colonel Mitchell, however, was looking at her with new interest. "Go on, Lieutenant. What's their next move?" Olivia didn't hesitate. "Based on the pattern, sir, they'll target the vehicle pool next, trying to cut off our ability to mount a mobile defense. After that, they'll focus on the command infrastructure, this building." "She's speculating, sir," Davis protested. "We need to focus on containment and counterattack, not theories from an admin officer." The radio crackled with a frantic report. "Command, this is Sergeant Willis at the motor pool. We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Request immediate support." The command center fell silent for a moment as Olivia's prediction played out in real time. Colonel Mitchell's eyes locked with hers, a new respect visible in his gaze. "Lieutenant Reeves," he said firmly, "you seem to have insight into the enemy's playbook. I want you on tactical analysis, effective immediately." "Sir," Major Davis protested, "with all due respect." "That's enough, Major." The colonel cut him off. "The lieutenant called this attack pattern before it happened. Right now, I need every advantage I can get." He turned back to Olivia. "What's your assessment, Lieutenant? How do we disrupt their plan?" For a moment, Olivia was stunned. After years of being dismissed and relegated to paperwork, she was suddenly being asked for tactical input during an actual attack. But her training kicked in, and she quickly studied the tactical display showing the positions of Marine defenders and insurgent attackers. "They're expecting us to reinforce each target as it comes under attack, sir," she said, pointing to the display. "That's spreading our forces thin and creating gaps they can exploit. Instead, we should consolidate our defense around the command center and ammunition remaining storage, then counterattack from a position of strength rather than react to each new threat." Colonel Mitchell considered her words, then nodded decisively. Make it happen, Major Davis. Consolidate our forces and prepare a counterattack force. Yes, sir, Davis replied stiffly, clearly unhappy but professional enough to follow orders. As the tactical situation developed, Olivia found herself fully integrated into the command team, providing analysis and predictions that repeatedly proved accurate. The insurgents, finding their carefully planned sequence of attacks disrupted, began to lose coordination and effectiveness. 2 hours into the attack, the tide had turned decisively in favor of the Marines. The insurgents were in retreat, leaving behind their dead and wounded. Camp Leatherneck had suffered damage and casualties, but far fewer than might have been expected from such a well-coordinated assault. As the immediate crisis subsided, Colonel Mitchell pulled Olivia aside. "Lieutenant, your insight probably saved a lot of lives today. Where did you learn to read enemy tactics like that?" "My father was a chess master, sir," Olivia replied. "He taught me to look for patterns and anticipate sequences of moves. In intelligence training, I just applied the same principles to tactical situations." The colonel nodded thoughtfully. "And then the Marine Corps stuck you behind a desk pushing paper." He shook his head. "A waste of talent. That ends today." Before Olivia could respond, a Marine rushed into the command center. "Sir, we've got a situation at the north perimeter. A group of insurgents broke through during the main attack and have established a position in the old storage building. They've got a clear line of fire on the main road, and the convoy can't depart until we clear them out." Colonel Mitchell frowned. "What's their strength?" "Unknown, sir, but they've got at least one heavy machine gun. They've pinned down Alpha Company's 2nd platoon, and we can't get close enough for an accurate assessment." The colonel turned to his operations officer. "Major Davis, options?" Davis studied the tactical map. "We could call in air support, sir, but with the building so close to our perimeter, there's significant risk of friendly fire. Artillery is out for the same reason. We need a precision strike team to flank the position, but with that machine gun covering the approaches." Colonel Mitchell's eyes drifted to Olivia, who was studying the map intently. "Lieutenant Reeves, you have something to add?" Olivia pointed to a small drainage culvert that ran near the storage building. "This approach is in the machine gun's blind spot, sir. A small team could move through here and get within grenade range of the position without being detected." "Good eye, Lieutenant," the colonel said, then turned to Davis. "Assemble a strike team. I want our best marksmen and assaulters." "Sir," Olivia said, straightening her posture, "I'd like to volunteer for the team." The command center went silent. Major Davis looked at her as though she'd grown a second head. "Lieutenant, this is a combat operation. Your MOS is administrative." "My MOS is on paper, Major," Olivia replied firmly. "I qualified expert on every weapons system during officer training, including the M2, 50 caliber. If that machine gun needs to be neutralized, I can do it." Colonel Mitchell studied her for a long moment. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for his decision. Finally, he nodded. "Gear up, Lieutenant. You're on the strike team." As Davis began to protest, the colonel raised a hand to silence him. "We just saw what happens when we ignore Lieutenant Reeves's abilities, Major. I'm not making that mistake twice." 20 minutes later, Olivia found herself crawling through a dusty drainage culvert, clad in full combat gear for the first time since her training days. Ahead of her was Staff Sergeant Wilson, a seasoned Force Recon Marine who had initially regarded her with skepticism, but had warmed slightly after she'd disassembled and reassembled his sidearm in record time while waiting for the operation to begin. Behind her were 3 more Marines, each chosen for their specific skills. Together, they formed an impromptu strike team tasked with neutralizing the insurgent position that was preventing the vital supply convoy from departing. The culvert was narrow, hot, and smelled of stagnant water and decay. Olivia's uniform was soaked with sweat and grime, but she felt more alive than she had in years. This was what she had trained for, what she had excelled at before bureaucracy and prejudice had sidelined her career. Wilson held up a fist, signaling the team to halt. They had reached the end of the culvert, which opened into a shallow ditch, about 50 meters from the rear of the storage building. The sound of the insurgent machine gun was clearly audible, its distinctive thump, 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 punctuated by the crack of rifle fire as the Marines of 2nd Platoon attempted to keep the gunners occupied. Wilson turned back to face the team. "Building has 2 entrances," he whispered. "Main door on the east side, currently covered by their machine gun, and a smaller access door on this side. Plan is to breach the rear door, clear the building, and neutralize the machine gun position." He looked directly at Olivia. "Lieutenant, no offense, but have you ever done this for real?" "No, Sergeant," she replied honestly. "But I've run this scenario in training more times than I can count. I know what to do." Wilson nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. "You'll be third in the stack. Your job is to cover the left sector once we're inside. Martinez and Jackson will take right and center. I'll lead. Cooper will bring up the rear." The plan was simple and direct, typical of Marine small unit tactics. Olivia checked her weapon one last time, a standard-issue M4 carbine with an ACOG sight. It felt good in her hands, familiar despite the years she'd spent behind a desk. "On my mark," Wilson said, preparing to leave the relative safety of the culvert. 3, 2, 1, move! The team burst from the drainage ditch and sprinted toward the rear of the storage building, using the terrain for cover whenever possible. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest, but her movements were fluid and precise, just as they had been during training. The insurgents, focused on their firefight with 2nd Platoon, didn't detect the small team approaching from their blind spot. They reached the rear door without incident. Wilson positioned himself to breach, with Martinez ready to be first through the door. Olivia took her position as third in the stack, controlling her breathing as adrenaline surged through her system. Wilson tried the door handle. Locked. He signaled for Cooper to come forward with the breaching shotgun. Cooper positioned himself, aimed at the lock, and fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, but effective. The door swung open. "Go! Go! Go!" Wilson hissed, and the team flowed into the building with practiced precision. The interior of the storage building was dim and cluttered with abandoned equipment and crates. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that penetrated through small windows near the ceiling. The team moved methodically through the space, covering their assigned sectors and communicating with hand signals. The machine gun fire was louder inside, emanating from the far end of the building where the main entrance opened onto the Marine position. Olivia could hear voices speaking Pashto, urgent and excited. The insurgents were still unaware of the team that had infiltrated their position. The strike team advanced through the building, moving from cover to cover. As they approached the main area, they could see the machine gun position, an M2, .50 caliber that the insurgents had likely captured in a previous engagement. 3 fighters were manning the weapon, with 2 more providing security with Alaska 47s. Wilson signaled for the team to hold position while he assessed the situation. The Marines had the element of surprise, but they were outnumbered, and the insurgents had a formidable weapon. A frontal assault could result in casualties on both sides. As Wilson contemplated their next move, one of the insurgents turned and spotted the team. He shouted a warning and raised his rifle. The element of surprise was lost. "Contact front," Wilson shouted, and the quiet infiltration transformed instantly into a chaotic firefight. Olivia moved to her assigned position behind a stack of crates, engaging the insurgent who had spotted them. Her first 3-round burst caught him center mass, and he crumpled to the floor. The training that had been drilled into her muscle memory took over, and she found herself operating with a calm efficiency that surprised even her. Martinez was hit in the initial exchange, a round catching him in the shoulder and spinning him to the ground. Cooper moved to drag him to cover while continuing to return fire. Wilson and Jackson were engaged with the remaining rifle-armed insurgent, leaving the machine gun crew momentarily unattended. The insurgents began to swing the heavy weapon around, attempting to bring it to bear on the Marine strike team. If they succeeded, the FITAS .50 caliber would tear through the crates and equipment the Marines were using for cover. "The gun!" Wilson shouted. "Someone take out that gun!" Olivia saw her opportunity. The machine gun crew was focused on traversing their weapon, momentarily exposed. She broke from cover and sprinted laterally across the building, moving to a position that would give her a clear shot at the crew. An insurgent spotted her movement and fired, rounds impacting the wall behind her as she slid into position behind a forklift. From this angle, she had a perfect shot at the machine gun crew, but they were now aware of her position and were frantically trying to bring their weapon to bear. It was a race. Olivia bringing her M4 up to engage, the insurgents traversing the heavy machine gun. Time seemed to slow as she aligned her sights on the first gunner, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. Her rounds found their mark, and the gunner slumped over the weapon. The second crew member grabbed the machine gun handles, continuing the traverse. Olivia shifted her aim and fired again, another controlled burst that dropped the insurgent to the floor. The third crew member raised his hands in surrender, but the remaining rifle-armed fighter was moving to take control of the machine gun. Olivia shifted position, trying to get a clear shot, but her magazine was empty. As she performed a rapid magazine change, the insurgent reached the machine gun and grabbed the handles. In that moment, Wilson eliminated the final rifle-armed insurgent, creating a momentary lull in the firefight. The only threat remaining was the man now behind the Jankoma, 50 caliber, who had swung it toward the main body of Marines. Olivia completed her reload, but realized she didn't have a clear shot from her position. The insurgent was about to open fire on her teammates. Without hesitation, she broke cover again, moving directly toward the machine gun position. The insurgent saw her coming and tried to traverse the weapon toward her, but Olivia was already within arm's reach. She slammed into him, knocking him away from the gun. The two grappled briefly before Olivia leveraged her Marine combat training, subduing the fighter with a series of precise strikes. As the final insurgent lay incapacitated, Olivia found herself standing behind the captured Wittenausten 50 caliber machine gun. She quickly oriented herself with the weapon. It was exactly like the ones she had trained on years ago. She checked the feed tray, confirmed the gun was operational, and swung it back toward the original firing position. "Lieutenant," Wilson called out, "we've got movement outside." More insurgents approaching from the east. Through the dusty glare of the building's main entrance, Olivia could see figures moving, using the distraction of the internal firefight to approach the building. The reinforcements would tip the scales against the already depleted strike team. "I've got the gun," she shouted back. "Cover the rear!" Wilson nodded and began repositioning the team to defend against threats from multiple directions. Cooper had managed to get Martinez to a protected position and was applying first aid while maintaining security. Olivia settled behind the Satine 50 caliber, adjusted the T&E mechanism to control the weapon's traverse and elevation, and waited for a clear target. The approaching insurgents, believing their comrades still held the building, were moving without much concern for cover. When the first fighter came into view, Olivia squeezed the trigger. The massive weapon roared to life, its deep, thunderous report echoing through the building. The 50 caliber rounds tore through the air, impacting with devastating effect. The approaching insurgents scattered, but they were caught in the open, exposed to the very weapon they had planned to use against the Marines. Olivia controlled the machine gun with the expertise that came from countless hours of training, short, controlled bursts that walked across the insurgents' position. The heavy rounds found their marks, and the approaching fighters retreated in disarray, leaving their casualties behind. As suddenly as it had begun, the firefight was over. The storage building fell silent except for the ringing in the Marines' ears and the distant sound of the ongoing battle elsewhere on the base. "Building secure," Wilson announced, moving to check on Martinez. "Good shooting, Lieutenant." There was newfound respect in his voice. Olivia remained behind the machine gun, scanning for additional threats. The weapon felt right in her hands, as though the years of administrative duty had never happened. She was a Marine first, trained for combat, and today she had proven it. "Command, this is Wilson," the staff sergeant reported over his radio. "Building secure, machine gun neutralized. We have one wounded, stable condition. Lieutenant Reeves is currently manning the captured 50 calories and covering the eastern approach." There was a pause, then Colonel Mitchell's voice came through the radio. "Excellent work, strike team. Hold position. Reinforcements are on the way." 15 minutes later, Marines from 2nd Platoon arrived to secure the building permanently. They found Olivia still behind the machine gun, her uniform soaked with sweat and dust, her face streaked with grime, but her eyes clear and focused. As she relinquished the weapon to the platoon's machine gun team, Staff Sergeant Wilson approached her. "You're full of surprises, Lieutenant," he said, offering her a canteen of water. "Where'd you learn to handle a full luff? 50 calories like that?" Olivia took a long drink before answering. "I was the top heavy weapons qualifier in my OCS class," she said simply. "Before they decided I'd be more useful pushing paper." Wilson shook his head. "Their loss, our gain today." He extended his hand. "Thank you for saving my team, ma'am." Olivia shook his hand, feeling a surge of pride that had nothing to do with rank or position. "Just doing my job, Sergeant. The job I was trained to do." As they exited the building, they found Colonel Mitchell waiting with his command vehicle. The colonel surveyed the scene, noting the bodies of the insurgents and the captured machine gun now being secured by Marine infantry. "Lieutenant Reeves," he said as Olivia approached and saluted, "I received Sergeant Wilson's report. Impressive work." "Thank you, sir," she replied, standing at attention despite her exhaustion. "The team performed exceptionally." "So I heard," the colonel said, "particularly the part where you assaulted the machine gun position and then used it to repel enemy reinforcements." He studied her for a moment. "You know, I've been reviewing your file since our conversation yesterday. Your scores at OCS were among the highest I've ever seen, especially in tactics and weapons proficiency." "Yes, sir," Olivia acknowledged, unsure where this was leading. "And yet, because of an administrative error, and, I suspect, some institutional biases, you've spent the last 5 years pushing paper instead of leading Marines in the field." Olivia remained silent. It wasn't her place to criticize the system, even if it had failed her. "That ends today," Colonel Mitchell continued. "I'm reassigning you to tactical operations, effective immediately. Major Davis will just have to find someone else to process his paperwork." For a moment, Olivia was speechless. After years of being overlooked and underestimated, a single day had changed everything. "Sir, Thank you, sir." The colonel's stern expression softened slightly. "Don't thank me, Lieutenant. You earned this through competence and courage. The Marine Corps needs officers like you where they can make a difference." He gestured toward the command vehicle. "Now come on. We've still got an insurgent attack to repel, and I need your insights on their next move." As Olivia climbed into the vehicle, she caught sight of herself in the side mirror, filthy, sweaty, with a smudge of blood on her cheek from a cut she hadn't even noticed. She looked like a combat Marine, not an administrative officer. For the first time in years, her outward appearance matched who she truly was inside. The vehicle pulled away, heading back to the command center where decisions would be made that would affect the lives of everyone on the base. And this time, Olivia Reeves wouldn't be pushing paper in a forgotten corner. She would be right in the center of it all, where she belonged. They had called her office staff until today. Now they would call her by her rightful title, Marine. The morning after the insurgent attack on Camp Leatherneck dawned with a different atmosphere than any Olivia had experienced in her 18 months at the forward operating base. As she made her way to the command center, Marines she passed nodded with respect or offered quiet greetings. Gone were the dismissive glances and muttered comments about office staff. Word had spread quickly about the administrative officer who had predicted the attack pattern and then manned a .50 caliber machine gun to defend the base. Colonel Mitchell had been true to his word. Olivia's reassignment to tactical operations had been processed overnight, and she now wore the insignia of the battalion's intelligence section on her uniform. It felt right, like correcting a long-standing mistake. Her new workspace was in the heart of the command center, rather than the forgotten storage room turned office where she had spent countless hours processing paperwork. "Morning, Lieutenant." Sergeant Wilson greeted her as she entered the Tactical Operations Center. His arm was in a sling from a minor wound sustained during yesterday's action, but he was otherwise on duty. "Ready for your first official day as something other than a paper pusher?" Olivia smiled. Wilson's friendly ribbing carried none of the condescension she'd grown accustomed to. "More than ready, Sergeant. How's Martinez doing?" "Doc says he'll be fine. The round went clean through. Missed anything important. He's already complaining about being stuck in the medical tent." Wilson handed her a tablet. "Colonel wants you at the briefing in 10. He's reorganizing our defensive posture based on your analysis." The morning briefing was already underway when Olivia entered the conference room. Major Davis was speaking, pointing to a tactical map of the base and surrounding area. "Reinforced the perimeter at these points, but we're still vulnerable to a coordinated assault similar to yesterday's attack." He looked up as Olivia entered, his expression carefully neutral. Whatever his personal feelings about her reassignment, he was professional enough to keep them to himself. Colonel Mitchell nodded to Olivia. Lieutenant Reeves, perfect timing. I was just about to call on you. Can you walk us through your assessment of potential follow-up attacks? All eyes in the room turned to her. Among the assembled officers and senior NCOs were several who had previously dismissed her capabilities or treated her as invisible. Now they were waiting for her tactical insight. The irony wasn't lost on Olivia, but she pushed personal vindication aside and focused on the mission. Yes, sir, she said, moving to the tactical display. Based on the pattern of yesterday's attack and intelligence gathered from the captured insurgents, I believe we're looking at a multi-phase operation. Yesterday was Phase 1, testing our defenses and attempting to disrupt our command and control capabilities. She manipulated the display to show the surrounding terrain. The insurgents took heavy casualties, but they achieved several objectives. They gathered intelligence on our response procedures, identified weaknesses in our perimeter, and most importantly, they confirmed that we're preparing a major supply convoy. Captain Reynolds, who had been among those dismissing her capabilities just days ago, leaned forward. You think the convoy is their primary target? I do, Olivia replied. Everything points to a sophisticated operation aimed at interdicting our supply lines. The attack on the base was preparatory. She highlighted several points along the convoy route. These are the most likely ambush points based on terrain analysis and historical attack patterns. What makes this situation particularly concerning is the level of coordination we saw yesterday. These aren't isolated insurgent cells. They're operating under unified command. Colonel Mitchell studied the map thoughtfully. Recommendations, Lieutenant? Olivia had spent half the night preparing for this question. 3 options, sir. First, we can postpone the convoy until we've conducted clearing operations along the route, safe but delays critical supplies. Second, we can significantly increase the convoy's security element, effective but pulls forces from base defense. Or third, we can run a decoy operation while moving the actual supplies via an alternate route. The room was silent as the officers considered her analysis. It was Major Davis who finally spoke. The decoy operation has merit, but it puts the decoy force at considerable risk. Agreed, Olivia said, surprising herself with her confidence in this room full of combat veterans. That's why I would recommend a hybrid approach. We send a heavily armed but lightly loaded decoy along the expected route, while the main supplies move via alternate means. Colonel Mitchell nodded slowly. Elaborate on these alternate means, Lieutenant. Air transport where possible, sir, and a small, fast-moving ground element using this route. She traced a path through the mountains that bordered the valley. It's longer but avoids the most likely ambush points. According to local intelligence, it's rarely used because of the difficult terrain, but our MRAPs can handle it. The colonel looked around the room. Thoughts, gentlemen? What followed was 30 minutes of intense discussion as the officers debated the merits of Olivia's proposal. She defended her analysis with quiet competence, citing relevant intelligence and tactical principles. When technical questions arose about vehicle capabilities or supply requirements, she deferred to the appropriate experts, showing both confidence in her own knowledge and respect for others' expertise. By the end of the meeting, a modified version of her plan had been adopted. The decoy convoy would depart as scheduled, heavily armed and prepared for ambush. Meanwhile, critical medical supplies and ammunition would move via the mountain route under cover of darkness, with a small security element led by Staff Sergeant Wilson. As the officers filed out of the conference room, Captain Reynolds paused beside Olivia. That was impressive, Lieutenant, he said, a hint of discomfort in his voice. I owe you an apology for some of my previous comments. Olivia met his gaze steadily. Thank you, Captain, but I'm more interested in moving forward than looking back. Reynolds nodded, seemingly relieved. Fair enough. I'd like to coordinate with you on the security element for the decoy convoy. Your insights would be valuable. Of course, Olivia replied. I'll be in the TOC for the rest of the morning. After Reynolds left, Colonel Mitchell approached. You handled that well, Reeves. Both the tactical analysis and the interpersonal dynamics. Thank you, sir. I've been in the Corps for 27 years, the colonel continued, and I've seen too many capable officers sidelined because they didn't fit someone's preconception of what a Marine should be. Your case is particularly egregious. He fixed her with an appraising look. But dwelling on past injustices doesn't win battles. You're focused on the mission rather than personal vindication. That's the mark of a good officer. I learned that from my father, sir, Olivia said. He always said that excellence is the best revenge. Mitchell chuckled. Wise man. Now, I have another assignment for you. I want you to work with Lieutenant Cooper from Communications. If the insurgents try to jam our comms during the convoy operation, I want contingencies in place. Yes, sir. I'll coordinate with him immediately. The colonel nodded. Dismissed, Lieutenant. And Reeves, good work. The next 48 hours were the most intense of Olivia's career. She divided her time between developing communications contingencies with Lieutenant Cooper, coordinating security details with Captain Reynolds, and analyzing the latest intelligence reports for any indication that the insurgents had discovered their plan. Sleep came in short bursts, and meals were often forgotten entirely, but Olivia felt more alive than she had in years. This was what she had trained for, what she had excelled at during officer training. The administrative purgatory of the past 5 years seemed like a distant memory. The evening before the operation, she found herself in the armory, inspecting the weapons for the security detail she would be accompanying on the decoy convoy. Major Davis had initially objected to her inclusion in the convoy team, arguing that her analytical skills were more valuable in the command center, but Colonel Mitchell had been firm. Lieutenant Reeves has proven herself in combat. She goes where her expertise is needed. As she field-stripped and reassembled an M240 machine gun, checking each component with practiced hands, Sergeant Wilson appeared beside her. Getting reacquainted with the hardware, LT? He asked, picking up an M4 and beginning his own inspection. Just making sure everything's operational, Olivia replied. This will be your first time back out since the storage building. Wilson nodded. Medical cleared me this morning. Arm's still a bit stiff, but I can handle a rifle. He watched her work for a moment. You know, when they first told me an admin officer was being reassigned to tactical, I was skeptical. Understandable, Olivia said, not looking up from her work. But after seeing you operate both in planning and in combat, I get it now. Wilson set the rifle down. What I don't get is how someone with your skills ended up pushing paper for 5 years. If you don't mind me asking. Olivia finished reassembling the machine gun before answering. Official reason? Administrative error in MOS assignment, followed by training slot limitations. She finally looked up at Wilson. Unofficial reason? I was a woman who scored too high on combat aptitude tests. Made some people uncomfortable. Easier to stick me in an office than deal with the implications. Wilson shook his head. Their loss, our gain, eventually. He picked up the rifle again. For what it's worth, the Marines I know care more about competence than chromosomes. You've proven yourself. That's what matters now. I appreciate that, Sergeant. Olivia stood, satisfied with the weapon's condition. See you at 0430. Looking forward to it, ma'am, Wilson replied with a grin. Nothing like a pre-dawn convoy through insurgent territory to really start the day right. The decoy convoy departed Camp Leatherneck at precisely 0500 the following morning. 8 vehicles in total, 4 MRAPs carrying a reinforced infantry squad, 2 supply trucks ostensibly loaded with ammunition and medical supplies, and 2 more MRAPs as rear security. Olivia rode in the lead vehicle alongside Captain Reynolds, who commanded the operation. As they passed through the main gate and onto the dusty road that led toward the provincial capital, Reynolds glanced sideways at her. Having second thoughts about volunteering for this, Lieutenant? Olivia checked her weapon for the 3rd time since mounting up. Not at all, sir. This was my plan. I should be here to see it executed. Reynolds nodded approvingly. That's the attitude I like to see. He keyed his radio. All elements. This is convoy actual. Maintain dispersion and stay alert. If Lieutenant Reeves's analysis is correct, we can expect contact within the next 2 hours. Olivia studied the passing terrain, comparing it to the maps and intelligence reports she had memorized. The convoy route wound through a series of low hills and dry riverbeds, offering numerous potential ambush sites. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the landscape and creating visual blind spots that would challenge even the most vigilant security teams. Captain, she said, pointing to a ridgeline about a kilometer ahead. That position offers a commanding view of the next section of road. If I were planning an ambush, that's where I'd put observers. Reynolds followed her gaze, then nodded to the gunner in the turret. Johnson, keep your eyes on that ridge. Lieutenant Reeves thinks we might have company. The gunner swiveled the MRAP's heavy machine gun toward the indicated position. Yes, sir. Nothing moving up there that I can see. They'd be well concealed, Olivia noted, probably using the rock formations for cover. The convoy continued forward, maintaining a steady pace. As they approached the area Olivia had identified, the atmosphere in the vehicle grew tenser. Every Marine was alert, weapons ready, eyes scanning for the slightest indication of hostile activity. They passed the ridgeline without incident, but Olivia's unease only grew. This doesn't feel right, she said quietly. Reynolds gave her a questioning look. We're past the position you identified. No contact. That's just it, sir, Olivia replied, frowning. Based on the intelligence, they should have made a move by now. Either they've abandoned the operation entirely, which seems unlikely given the resources they've committed, or her radio crackled to life with an urgent transmission from Camp Leatherneck. Convoy Actual, this is Leatherneck Command. Be advised we have reports of significant enemy movement to your north, approximately 5 clicks from your position. Appears they may be attempting to set up a blocking position ahead of your route. Reynolds keyed his microphone. Understood, Command. Any word on the secondary convoy? Secondary convoy is proceeding as planned, no contact reported. Olivia studied her map. They're adapting, sir. They've identified our most likely route and are setting up a more elaborate ambush ahead, rather than hitting us in the expected locations. Which means they're committing more resources than we anticipated, Reynolds concluded. Question is, do we proceed and engage or divert and avoid contact? It was a tactical question that got to the heart of their mission. The decoy convoy was designed to draw insurgent attention away from the real supply movement. If they diverted now, they might preserve their force but fail in their primary objective. We proceed, sir, Olivia said firmly, but carefully. If they're setting up a blocking position, they'll have supporting elements on the high ground to prevent us from maneuvering. We need to identify those positions before we commit to the engagement. Reynolds studied her for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. He keyed his radio again. All elements, be advised. Possible enemy blocking position ahead. We will continue advance but at reduced speed. All gunners, focus on high ground to our flanks. We need to identify enemy supporting positions. The convoy reduced speed, advancing cautiously through the increasingly rugged terrain. Olivia requested satellite imagery from the command center, using her tablet to analyze potential insurgent positions based on terrain features and known tactics. There, she said suddenly, pointing to a cluster of large rocks overlooking a narrow section of road ahead. That position would provide excellent fields of fire on the road below. And here, she indicated another position on the opposite side of the valley. They could have a second team to create interlocking fields of fire, classic ambush setup. Reynolds relayed her observations to the other vehicles, redirecting the gunners' attention to the identified positions. For several tense minutes, the convoy continued its advance, all eyes focused on the suspected insurgent locations. The first confirmation came from the third vehicle in line. Convoy Actual, this is Bravo 3. Movement confirmed at the first position Lieutenant Reeves identified. At least 3 individuals with what appears to be a machine gun or RPG team. Seconds later, the rear security element reported similar sightings at the second position. The insurgents had indeed set up exactly where Olivia had predicted, preparing a deadly crossfire that would have caught the convoy in a kill zone. All elements hold position, Reynolds ordered. Maintain visual on identified enemy positions but do not engage unless fired upon. He turned to Olivia. Recommendations, Lieutenant? This was the moment of truth. The decoy convoy had succeeded in drawing insurgent attention, but now they faced a prepared enemy in advantageous positions. Retreat would undermine their mission. Proceeding blindly would risk casualties. We need to disrupt their plan before they spring the trap, Olivia said, thinking quickly. If we can neutralize one of the supporting positions, we can create a gap in their fire coverage that would allow us to move through the kill zone. Reynolds nodded. And how do you propose we do that without exposing ourselves? Olivia pointed to a dry stream that ran parallel to the road. That wash provides concealed approach to within 100 meters of the northern position. A small team could move up using that cover and neutralize the position with grenades or precision fire. That's a risky play, Reynolds observed. If they have additional security we haven't spotted, the assault team would be vulnerable. True, Olivia acknowledged, but less risky than driving into a prepared ambush. And time is against us. The longer we wait, the more likely they are to receive reinforcements or grow suspicious of our delay. Reynolds considered for a moment, then made his decision. We'll do it. Wilson's team will make the approach while we maintain overwatch from here. He keyed his radio. Sergeant Wilson, prepare your fire team for a flanking maneuver. To Olivia's surprise, he then added, Lieutenant Reeves will accompany and provide tactical guidance. Olivia looked at him sharply. Sir? This was your idea, Lieutenant, and you've proven your combat capabilities. Wilson's a good NCO, but you've demonstrated a knack for reading this enemy. I want you on that team. It was a statement of trust that would have been unimaginable just days ago. Olivia nodded. Yes, sir. Thank you. Minutes later, she was moving through the dry stream alongside Sergeant Wilson and 3 Marines from his fire team. They advanced in tactical formation, using the banks of the wash for cover as they approached the insurgent position. 150 meters to target, Wilson whispered as they paused behind a bend in the stream. How do you want to play this, Lieutenant? Olivia surveyed the terrain ahead. The wash continued toward the insurgent position but veered slightly east in its final approach. We'll follow the stream as far as we can, then split into 2 elements. Your team establishes a base of fire from that position. She indicated a cluster of rocks at the point where the wash turned, while I move to the flank with Lance Corporal Rivera to target the position with grenades. Wilson raised an eyebrow. With respect, ma'am, that puts you in the most exposed position. I'm the lightest and fastest, Olivia replied simply. And I've got the best throwing arm. It wasn't bravado. It was tactical reality. The success of the maneuver depended on speed and precision, and Olivia knew she was the best qualified for the task. Wilson seemed to recognize this. Understood. We'll provide covering fire on your signal. They continued their advance, moving silently through the stream until they reached the position Olivia had identified. Wilson and 2 Marines set up their weapons, oriented toward the insurgent position now visible on the ridgeline above. Olivia and Rivera prepared to break cover and move to their flanking position. On my mark, Olivia whispered, checking her weapon one last time. 3, 2, 1, go. She and Rivera burst from the stream, sprinting in a low crouch toward a position that would give them a clear throw to the insurgent nest. The insurgents, focused on the convoy below, didn't immediately notice the movement on their flank. Olivia reached the position first, taking cover behind a large rock. Rivera joined her seconds later. From here, they had a clear view of the insurgent position. 3 fighters with an RPG and light machine gun, perfectly positioned to rain fire down on the convoy when it entered the narrow section of road. Olivia signaled to Wilson that they were in position, then prepared 2 grenades. Rivera would provide covering fire if needed. The distance was at the outer edge of effective grenade range, but Olivia had always excelled at grenade training. It was one of the skills that had impressed her instructors at OCS. She pulled the pin on the first grenade, held it for 2 seconds, then threw with a powerful, accurate motion honed through years of competitive softball in college. The grenade arced perfectly, landing directly in the insurgent position. The explosion was followed immediately by confused shouting. Before the dust had settled, Olivia had already launched the second grenade. This one landed just as accurately, and the resulting explosion silenced the voices from above. "Wilson, move up!" she called into her radio. "Rivera, cover me!" Olivia advanced toward the insurgent position, her rifle at the ready. Wilson and his team moved quickly to join her, providing overlapping fields of fire as they approached the site of the explosion. What they found was a devastated fighting position. 2 insurgents were dead, a third severely wounded. Their weapons, including the RPG they had planned to use against the convoy, were damaged or scattered by the blast. "Clear," Wilson announced after checking the position thoroughly. "Lieutenant, your grenades hit dead center. I've never seen throwing like that." Olivia was already on the radio to Captain Reynolds. "Convoy actual, this is Reeves. Northern position neutralized. No friendly casualties. Reynolds' voice came back immediately. Excellent work, Lieutenant. We're engaging the southern position with the MRAP's heavy weapons now. Stand by. The sound of heavy machine gun fire echoed across the valley as the convoy's gunners opened up on the second insurgent position. With their northern support eliminated and their ambush compromised, the southern team soon abandoned their position, fleeing into the hills. 30 minutes later, the convoy was moving again, bypassing the intended kill zone and continuing along its route. Olivia rode once more with Captain Reynolds, who had insisted on personally debriefing her on the flanking maneuver. "That was exemplary work, Lieutenant," he said as they bounced along the rough road. "Your tactical assessment was spot on, and your execution was flawless." "Thank you, sir. Wilson and his team performed excellently." Reynolds smiled slightly. "According to Wilson, you're the one who neutralized the position with 2 perfect grenade throws. He was quite impressed." Olivia shrugged. "I played softball in college. The throwing motion is similar." "Softball to combat grenades," Reynolds mused. "Not a transition many officers can claim." He grew more serious. "You know, when Colonel Mitchell first reassigned you to tactical, I had my doubts. Not because you're a woman," he added quickly, "but because shifting from administrative to combat operations isn't a common career path." "I understand, sir." "But I was wrong," Reynolds continued. "You belong in tactical operations. Your performance these past few days has made that abundantly clear." He glanced at her. "I hope you don't hold my initial skepticism against me." Olivia considered this. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted." "I don't hold grudges, Captain. The past is the past. But I do expect to be judged on my performance going forward, not on preconceptions or stereotypes." Reynolds nodded slowly. "That's fair. And based on your performance so far, those judgments will be overwhelmingly positive." He checked his watch. "The secondary convoy should be nearing the base by now. Once we complete this circuit and return to Leatherneck, your plan will have been executed successfully from start to finish." Olivia allowed herself a small smile. "Let's not celebrate until we're all back safely, sir." "Spoken like a true combat officer," Reynolds replied. "I think you're going to fit in just fine." The return to Camp Leatherneck should have been triumphant. The decoy convoy had successfully drawn the insurgents' attention away from the real supply movement, which had returned safely to base hours earlier. Lieutenant Olivia Reeves had proven herself again, both in planning and in combat execution. But as the dusty vehicles rolled through the main gate, the atmosphere was unexpectedly tense. Colonel Mitchell was waiting for them, his expression grave. "Captain Reynolds, Lieutenant Reeves, my office immediately," he ordered as soon as they dismounted. The abruptness of his tone sent a ripple of concern through the returning Marines. "Sir, what's happened?" Reynolds asked as they fell in step with the commander. "We've received intel that the insurgents are planning something big," Mitchell replied, keeping his voice low. "Something that makes yesterday's attack look like a warm-up exercise." Inside the colonel's office, the situation became clearer. Major Davis was already there, along with a battalion intelligence officer and 2 civilians Olivia didn't recognize. "These gentlemen are from the agency," Mitchell explained, gesturing to the civilians. "They've been tracking insurgent communications and just intercepted something concerning." One of the CIA officers, a lean man with prematurely gray hair, nodded to Olivia. "Lieutenant Reeves, I presume? Your reputation precedes you." "I'm Andrews." Olivia shook his hand, surprised at being recognized. "You know who I am?" When a former administrative officer transitions to leading successful combat operations against a sophisticated insurgent network, people notice. Andrews replied with a thin smile. "Especially when that officer's tactical predictions keep proving accurate." Colonel Mitchell gestured for everyone to sit. "Mr. Andrews, please continue with your briefing." The CIA officer activated a display on the wall, showing satellite imagery of the area surrounding Camp Leatherneck. "We've detected unusual movement patterns in 3 villages to the north and east. Vehicles coming and going at odd hours, weapons being moved, fighters gathering." He highlighted several locations on the map. Based on signal intelligence and human sources, we believe the insurgents are preparing for a major coordinated attack within the next 48 to 72 hours. Their target appears to be Camp Leatherneck itself. Another direct assault? Major Davis asked skeptically. They took heavy casualties in the last attempt. Not exactly, Andrews replied. This looks more sophisticated. Multiple attack vectors, including a possible insider threat component. The room fell silent at this last point. Insider attacks had become an increasing concern throughout Afghanistan, with insurgents infiltrating bases or turning Afghan partners against coalition forces. Colonel Mitchell turned to Olivia. Lieutenant Reeves, you've demonstrated an unusual ability to predict these insurgents' tactics. What's your assessment? All eyes turned to her. Just days ago, she had been processing paperwork in a forgotten corner of the base. Now, senior officers and intelligence officials were waiting for her analysis. The transformation was still disorienting, but Olivia focused on the task at hand. She studied the intelligence displayed on the screen, looking for patterns similar to those she had identified before. The distributed nature of the preparation suggests they're planning multiple simultaneous attacks rather than a single thrust, she began. That's consistent with their previous operation, but on a larger scale. Olivia pointed to one of the villages. This location concerns me most. It's positioned to allow them to target our air assets on the ground. If they have heavy weapons positioned here, they could potentially damage or destroy aircraft without ever breaching the perimeter. Andrews nodded approvingly. That matches our assessment. As for the insider threat, Olivia continued, that would explain how they knew about the convoy schedule so quickly. They may have someone feeding them information about base operations. The question is, who? Reynolds said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Mitchell leaned forward. We have over 200 local contractors on base, plus Afghan military liaisons. Any of them could be compromised. Or it could be someone using electronic means, Olivia suggested. Our communication security hasn't been updated in months. There are vulnerabilities in our systems that a sophisticated adversary could exploit. Andrews exchanged glances with his colleague. We hadn't considered that angle. Most insider threats we've encountered have been human sources. It could be both, Olivia acknowledged, but given the pattern of information leakage, I'd prioritize signals intelligence and communication security. Colonel Mitchell nodded decisively. Major Davis, coordinate with communications to implement a complete security protocol update. Captain Reynolds, discreetly increase security around sensitive areas, especially the flight line and ammunition storage. He turned to Olivia. Lieutenant Reeves, I want you to work directly with Mr. Andrews and his team. Develop countermeasures for each of the attack vectors you've identified. Yes, sir, Olivia replied, still somewhat surprised by the level of responsibility being placed on her shoulders. After the meeting dispersed, Andrews approached her. Impressive analysis, Lieutenant. You picked up on things that seasoned intelligence officers missed. I just connect patterns, Olivia said modestly. It's how my mind works. That's exactly what intelligence work is about, Andrews replied, finding patterns where others see random events. He studied her for a moment. You know, when this deployment ends, you might consider other options. Your talents would be highly valued in certain agencies. Olivia smiled politely but didn't respond directly. Her focus was on the immediate threat, not future career opportunities. Let's start by keeping this base secure. Where's your team set up? For the next 36 hours, Olivia worked alongside the CIA team, developing a comprehensive counterinsurgency plan. They analyzed every potential attack vector, predicted likely tactics, and designed defensive measures specifically tailored to the terrain and available forces. Throughout this process, Olivia found herself drawing on skills she'd honed during her years in administrative roles, organizational abilities, attention to detail, and systematic thinking. What had once felt like career purgatory now revealed itself as valuable training for her current responsibilities. You're unusually methodical for a Marine officer, Andrews commented as they worked through contingency plans for the third consecutive hour. Most tend to favor direct action over detailed planning. 5 years processing paperwork will do that to you, Olivia replied wryly. When your entire job revolves around tracking details others ignore, you develop certain habits. Andrews nodded thoughtfully. A blessing in disguise, perhaps. This situation requires exactly your skill set, someone who can see both the forest and the trees. By early evening of the second day, they had completed a comprehensive defense plan. Colonel Mitchell called a command briefing for all officers and senior NCOs, with Olivia designated as the primary presenter, an honor typically reserved for the most senior tactical officers. The briefing room was packed when she stepped to the front. Faces that had once looked through her as though she were invisible now watched with focused attention. Among them were officers who had dismissed her, NCOs who had questioned her abilities, and Marines who had only known her as the admin lieutenant. "Gentlemen," Olivia began, her voice steady and confident, "we face a sophisticated multi-vector insurgent attack expected within the next 24 to 36 hours. Based on intelligence analysis and observed patterns, we've developed a proactive defense strategy that will not only repel the attack, but potentially cripple the insurgent network in this region." For the next 40 minutes, she outlined the defense plan in meticulous detail: perimeter reinforcements, counter-battery positions, rapid response teams, communications, security protocols, and contingency measures for every scenario they could anticipate. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Colonel Mitchell stood. "Questions?" Major Davis raised his hand. "Lieutenant Reeves, this plan commits significant resources to defending the northern sector, particularly around the flight line. What if this is a feint, and their main thrust comes from another direction?" It was a fair question, and one that would have intimidated Olivia just days ago. Now she welcomed the tactical discussion. "That possibility is addressed in Contingency Plan Charlie Major. We've positioned rapid response forces here and here." She highlighted positions on the tactical display, "with sufficient mobility to reinforce any sector within 4 minutes. Additionally, the resource commitment is weighted toward mobile assets, rather than fixed defenses, precisely to allow for tactical flexibility." Davis nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. Other questions followed: technical, tactical, and logistical, and Olivia addressed each one with the same confidence and precision. By the end of the briefing, even the most skeptical officers appeared convinced of the plan's merits. "Implementation begins immediately," Colonel Mitchell announced. "Captain Reynolds will coordinate the tactical elements. Lieutenant Reeves will oversee intelligence integration and early warning systems." He surveyed the room. "This is not a drill, people. Based on every indication, we're facing the most significant attack on this facility since its establishment. First, expect every Marine to perform their duties with the utmost professionalism." As the officers filed out to begin preparations, Colonel Mitchell held Olivia back. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant. That was one of the most comprehensive tactical briefings I've seen in 27 years of service." "Thank you, sir." "I've been watching you closely these past few days," the colonel continued. "Your transition from administrative to tactical operations has been remarkable. Most officers would struggle with such an abrupt shift in responsibilities." Olivia considered this. "I think, in some ways, my administrative background prepared me for this, sir. I spent years organizing information, identifying patterns in data, and developing systematic solutions to complex problems. The context is different, but the fundamental skills are similar." Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "An insightful perspective, and perhaps a lesson for our officer development programs." He checked his watch. "You should get some rest while you can. I suspect the next 24 hours will be demanding." "Yes, sir," Olivia replied, though she doubted sleep would come easily with so much at stake. The attack began at 0347 the following morning, a time chosen to catch the base at its lowest alertness level. But thanks to Olivia's early warning system, which included acoustic sensors positioned at strategic locations around the base perimeter, they had nearly 10 minutes advance notice of the insurgents' approach. Olivia was in the Tactical Operations Center when the first alerts came in, having spent most of the night monitoring intelligence feeds. "Movement detected. Grid sectors Alpha 3 and Bravo 7, she announced, highlighting the locations on the main display. Colonel Mitchell, who had been catching a few hours of sleep on a cot in his office, appeared immediately. "Composition? Multiple small teams, approaching under cover of darkness," Olivia replied, studying the sensor data. "Consistent with the infiltration tactics we anticipated. They're avoiding our regular patrol routes." "Implement Phase 1, Mitchell ordered, and the TOC burst into activity as the defensive plan Olivia had designed began to unfold. Instead of sounding general alarms, which would have alerted the insurgents that they'd been detected, selected defensive positions were quietly reinforced. Sniper teams that had been pre-positioned in elevated locations activated their night vision equipment. The rapid response force mounted their vehicles but remained in concealed positions, engines off. They're probing the perimeter at the predicted entry points, Olivia reported, watching as thermal imagery showed heat signatures approaching the fence line. Exactly as anticipated. Mitchell nodded grimly. Let them commit to the attack before we reveal our full defensive posture. I want them fully exposed when we respond. Quote, the insurgents breached the perimeter at 3 points simultaneously, using shaped charges to blow holes in the fence. They expected to encounter minimal resistance, perhaps a few drowsy guards easily overwhelmed by their superior numbers. Instead, they walked into prepared fields of fire. The first wave of attackers was cut down before they advanced 20 meters into the base. The second wave, seeing their comrades fall, attempted to retreat but found their escape routes covered by pre-positioned Marine fire teams. Phase 2, Mitchell ordered and Olivia relayed the command. The rapid response force roared to life, moving to interdict insurgents, attempting to target the flight line with mortars and rocket-propelled grenades. Meanwhile, counter-battery radar detected the launch locations of enemy indirect fire, allowing Marine artillery to respond with devastating accuracy. Sir, we're detecting communications on the frequency we identified as their command channel, the signal's intelligence officer reported. They're confused by our level of preparedness. The attack isn't proceeding according to their plan. Can we jam it? Mitchell asked. Better than that, Olivia interjected. We can feed them false information. She explained her idea quickly, using the captured insurgent communications equipment to transmit misleading tactical updates, creating confusion in their command structure. Mitchell approved immediately, and the deception operation began. Within minutes, insurgent units were receiving contradictory orders, leading to disorganization and tactical paralysis. The battle continued for nearly 3 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. By sunrise, the insurgent attack had been completely repulsed, with minimal damage to base infrastructure and, most importantly, no Marine casualties. 53 enemy KIA, 17 captured, including what appears to be their local commander. Captain Reynolds reported during the post-battle assessment, we've also seized significant weapons caches and intelligence materials. Colonel Mitchell nodded with satisfaction. And our personnel? 6 wounded, none critically. All expected to make full recoveries. The colonel's gaze moved to Olivia, who was updating the tactical display with the latest information from the perimeter teams. This outcome is directly attributable to Lieutenant Reeves's defense plan. Her early warning system gave us the tactical advantage from the first moment. Her prediction of attack vectors was accurate to within 50 meters. The officers assembled for the briefing murmured in agreement. Even Major Davis, who had been among the most skeptical of Olivia's capabilities, nodded respectfully in her direction. We're not finished, Olivia cautioned, looking up from her work. The communications we intercepted suggest this was part of a larger operation. The main insurgent force is still intact, and they'll be looking to salvage something from this failure. What do you recommend? Mitchell asked. A counteroffensive, Olivia replied without hesitation. They're not expecting us to transition immediately from defense to offense. Their fighters are scattered, their command structure disrupted, and their morale damaged. This is our opportunity to strike a decisive blow. She outlined her proposal, a 2-pronged operation targeting the insurgent staging areas they had identified during their intelligence gathering. Quick, aggressive strikes before the enemy could regroup or reinforce. Mitchell considered the plan, then turned to his operations officer. Major Davis, your assessment? Davis studied the tactical display, then straightened. Lieutenant Reeves's analysis is sound, sir. The insurgents will be expecting us to adopt a defensive posture after repelling their attack. A rapid counteroffensive could catch them unprepared. Very well, Mitchell decided. Captain Reynolds, prepare 2 strike teams. Lieutenant Reeves will provide tactical guidance. I want wheels up in 90 minutes. As the officers dispersed to prepare for the operation, Andrews, the CIA officer, approached Olivia. Impressive work, Lieutenant. Not many tactical officers would have the foresight to immediately press the advantage. In chess, the counterattack, after defending against a major offensive, is often decisive, Olivia replied. The same principle applies here. Andrews smiled. You continue to surprise me. Are you sure you won't consider my suggestion about exploring opportunities beyond the Marine Corps when your deployment ends? Before Olivia could respond, Colonel Mitchell rejoined them. Mr. Andrews, I'm afraid the lieutenant won't be available for recruitment by other agencies. I've already submitted paperwork to correct her MOS assignment and backdate her combat experience. The Marine Corps made a mistake with Lieutenant Reeves, and we intend to rectify it. Andrews raised an eyebrow. Backdating experience? That's unusual, isn't it? So is finding an administrative officer who can plan and execute combat operations with this level of proficiency, Mitchell replied. Bureaucratic rules shouldn't stand in the way of recognizing exceptional talent. Olivia was momentarily speechless. The implications of Mitchell's statement were significant, not just formal recognition of her capabilities, but potentially accelerated promotion opportunities and access to training and assignments that had previously been closed to her. Thank you, sir, she said finally. But right now, my focus is on the counteroffensive. Mitchell nodded approvingly. As it should be, Lieutenant. Carry on. The counteroffensive launched exactly as Olivia had planned. 2 strike teams, each composed of a reinforced Marine platoon with vehicle support, hit the insurgent staging areas simultaneously. The operations were textbook examples of rapid, decisive action, in and out within 40 minutes, leaving devastated insurgent infrastructure and demoralized fighters in their wake. By late afternoon, the Marines had returned to Camp Leatherneck, bringing with them captured insurgent leaders, weapons, and intelligence materials. The combined effect of repelling the base attack and launching immediate counterstrikes had dealt the local insurgent network a blow from which it would take months to recover. In the aftermath, as the base returned to normal operations, Olivia found herself in an unexpected position. Marines who had previously ignored her now sought her tactical advice. Officers who had dismissed her capabilities now included her in operational planning. She had become, almost overnight, one of the most respected tactical minds on the base. 3 days after the battle, Colonel Mitchell summoned her to his office. When she arrived, she found not only the colonel but also a full-bird colonel from Marine Corps headquarters, who had flown in specifically to assess the situation at Camp Leatherneck. Lieutenant Reeves, Mitchell began. Colonel Harrington is here from Quantico. He's interested in the recent operations against the insurgent network. Harrington, a weathered Marine with the intense gaze of someone who had seen too much combat, extended his hand. Lieutenant, I've reviewed the after-action reports and spoken with several officers involved in the operations. Your name features prominently in their accounts. I was simply doing my duties, sir, Olivia replied, unsure where this conversation was heading. Your duty included predicting enemy tactics with uncanny accuracy, designing a defense plan that resulted in 0 Marine casualties against a superior force, and then immediately transitioning to a counteroffensive that crippled the insurgent network. Harrington said dryly. That goes somewhat beyond standard expectations for a lieutenant. He gestured for her to sit. I'm particularly interested in how someone with an administrative MOS developed such sophisticated tactical abilities. Olivia explained her background, her top performance at OCS, the administrative error that had placed her in the wrong career track, and the subsequent years spent developing skills that had unexpectedly prepared her for her current role. Harrington listened attentively, occasionally glancing at notes he had brought with him. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. Lieutenant, I'm here because what happened at Camp Leatherneck has attracted attention at the highest levels. The successful defense against a major insurgent attack, followed by a decisive counteroffensive, all with minimal casualties, that's significant. He exchanged glances with Colonel Mitchell before continuing. But what's most interesting is that the architect of this success was an officer who spent 5 years being underutilized because of administrative errors and, frankly, institutional biases. Olivia remained silent, sensing there was more to come. The Commandant has taken a personal interest in your case, Harrington continued. He sees it as emblematic of broader issues in how we identify and develop talent within the Corps. He slid a folder across the desk to her. "These are orders reassigning you to Quantico upon completion of your deployment. You'll be joining the Tactical Analysis Division as an instructor and participating in a comprehensive review of our officer development programs." Olivia opened the folder, scanning the orders with growing amazement. "Sir, this is unexpected, but well-deserved," Mitchell interjected. "The Marine Corps needs officers who can think beyond conventional tactics and adapt to evolving threats. You've demonstrated those capabilities under fire." Harrington nodded in agreement. "Additionally, you'll be attending the Advanced Combat Tactical course, usually reserved for captains and above. The Commandant has personally approved the exception." It was almost too much to process. Just weeks ago, Olivia had been processing paperwork in a forgotten corner of the base, her talents unrecognized and her career stagnant. Now she was being fast-tracked into positions typically reserved for officers with years more experience. "I don't know what to say, sir," she admitted. "You don't need to say anything, Lieutenant," Harrington replied. "Your actions have spoken volumes already. The question now is what you'll do with this opportunity." Olivia thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The frustration of being sidelined, the determination to maintain her skills despite institutional obstacles, and finally, the chance to prove her capabilities when it mattered most. "I'll ensure that other officers with unconventional backgrounds or skills don't face the same barriers I did, sir," she said firmly. "Talent comes in many forms, and the Corps is stronger when we recognize and utilize all of it." Harrington smiled for the first time. "That's exactly what the Commandant was hoping you'd say. There's a broader mission here, Lieutenant Reeves. Your experience highlights systemic issues that need addressing. You're not just being recognized for your tactical abilities, you're being positioned to help change the institution itself." As the implications of this sank in, Olivia felt a new sense of purpose crystallizing within her. The years of frustration of being dismissed and underutilized had led to this moment, a chance not just to advance her own career, but to remove obstacles for others facing similar challenges. "I'm ready for that mission, sir," she said, her voice steady and determined. "I believe you are, Lieutenant," Harrington replied. "In fact, I'm counting on it." 6 months after the insurgent attack on Camp Leatherneck, Olivia Reeves stood on the firing range at Quantico, watching a group of officer candidates struggling with the M2, 50 caliber machine gun. The heavy weapon seemed to intimidate them, its industrial bulk and thunderous report causing many to hesitate or flinch during operation. Beside her, Master Gunnery Sergeant Coleman shook his head in disappointment. "They're overthinking it," he muttered. "Too much theory, not enough practical application." Olivia nodded in agreement. "That's exactly the issue I highlighted in my curriculum revision proposal. We're teaching them to respect the weapon so much that they're afraid of it." The autumn sun cast long shadows across the Virginia training grounds as afternoon transitioned toward evening. In the distance, the administrative buildings of Marine Corps Base Quantico gleamed in the golden light. It was a far cry from the dusty, dangerous environment of Afghanistan, but Olivia had found her own kind of battle to fight here, one against institutional inertia and outdated training methodologies. "Lieutenant Reeves," Coleman said, a hint of mischief in his weathered face. "Maybe these candidates need a proper demonstration. Show them how it's done?" Olivia smiled. Coleman was one of the few instructors who had immediately accepted her presence in the Tactical Analysis Division, recognizing her combat experience rather than fixating on her administrative background. Others had been less welcoming, viewing her rapid advancement with suspicion or resentment. "You know what, Gunny? I think they do." She approached the firing line, where a young officer candidate named Rodriguez was struggling to maintain proper control of the weapon during a sustained fire exercise. "Having trouble, candidate?" she asked. Rodriguez straightened immediately. "Yes, ma'am. The recoil is more substantial than I expected." "Mind if I demonstrate?" The candidate stepped aside gratefully, and Olivia took position behind the M2. She checked the weapon with practiced hands, making minute adjustments to the headspace and timing critical settings that many instructors glossed over in training. "The key is to become part of the weapon," she explained, loud enough for the other candidates to hear. Don't fight the recoil. Anticipate it. Flow with it. Control it through your body position rather than muscle tension. She took a breath, settled into a perfect stance, and squeezed the trigger. The .50 caliber roared to life, its distinctive thump-thump-thump echoing across the range. The heavy rounds impacted the target with precision, creating a tight grouping that would have been devastating to any enemy position. When she finished the demonstration, Olivia stepped back and gestured for Rodriguez to reclaim the position. "Try it now. Remember, part of the weapon, not fighting against it." The candidate approached with new confidence, mimicking Olivia's stance and grip. When he fired this time, his control was noticeably improved, the rounds finding their targets with reasonable accuracy. "Much better," Olivia approved. "Keep practicing that feeling. The M2 isn't just a weapon, it's a force multiplier that can change the entire dynamic of an engagement." As she walked back to Coleman's position, she noticed several senior officers observing from the edge of the range. Among them was Colonel Harrington, who had brought her to Quantico, and beside him, a silver-haired general she recognized immediately, General Maxwell, the Deputy Commandant for Combat Development and Integration. Olivia approached and rendered a crisp salute. "Good afternoon, sirs." "At ease, Lieutenant," General Maxwell replied, returning the salute. "Impressive demonstration. Where did you learn to handle the M2 with that level of proficiency?" "OCS and infantry training, sir, supplemented by combat experience in Afghanistan," Olivia answered. The general raised an eyebrow. "You've had an unusual career trajectory, Lieutenant. I've been reading your file with great interest." "Yes, sir." "It's been non-traditional." Maxwell chuckled. "That's one way to put it. Administrative error resulting in 5 years of misassignment would be another." His expression grew more serious. "Walk with me, Lieutenant. Colonel Harrington has been singing your praises, and I'd like to hear more about your experiences firsthand." As they strolled away from the firing range, General Maxwell got straight to the point. "Your proposals for revising tactical training have caused quite a stir, Lieutenant. Some of the old guard aren't happy with a junior officer, particularly one with your background, suggesting significant changes to established protocols." "I understand that, sir," Olivia replied carefully. "But my recommendations are based on direct combat observations and outcomes. The traditional approach to tactical training doesn't adequately prepare officers for the adaptive, asymmetric threats we're facing." Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. "I tend to agree. Which is why I've approved your curriculum revisions for implementation next training cycle." Olivia stopped in her tracks, momentarily forgetting protocol. "Sir? You've approved them?" "All of them," the general confirmed. "The integrated tactical decision-making module, the adaptive threat response training, and most controversially, your recommendation to eliminate gender-specific physical standards in favor of role-specific requirements." This last point had been the most contentious of Olivia's proposals. Traditional Marine Corps training maintained different physical standards for male and female Marines, a policy she had argued was outdated and counterproductive. "The battlefield doesn't care about gender," she had written in her proposal. "It cares about capability. Our training standards should reflect that reality." "Thank you, sir," she said, still processing the implications of his decision. "I believe these changes will produce more effective combat officers." "I expect they will," Maxwell agreed. "But that's not the only reason I'm here today." He handed her a folder. "These are your new orders, Lieutenant. Or should I say, Captain Reeves." Olivia opened the folder with steady hands that belied her internal shock. Inside was a promotion warrant to the rank of captain, effective immediately, along with orders assigning her to the newly formed Adaptive Tactics Development Team at Headquarters Marine Corps. "This is unexpected, sir." "Is it?" Maxwell asked with a slight smile. "You've demonstrated exceptional tactical acumen under combat conditions, developed innovative training methodologies, and shown the kind of leadership the modern Marine Corps needs. The promotion is well-deserved." He gestured toward the administrative buildings in the distance. "The Adaptive Tactics Team is my initiative, a response to the evolving nature of warfare. We're bringing together our best minds to develop new approaches to combat training and operational planning. Your experience bridges traditional and unconventional warfare in ways that few other officers can claim." Olivia struggled to find appropriate words. 6 months ago, she had been an administrative officer processing paperwork at a forward operating base. Now she was being promoted ahead of schedule and assigned to a headquarters-level tactical development team. "When do I report, sir?" she asked finally. 2 weeks. Finish up your current training cycle, then report to Washington. Maxwell extended his hand. "Congratulations, Captain Reeves. I expect great things from you." As the general walked away, Colonel Harrington approached. "Told you he was impressed with your work," he said with satisfaction. "How does it feel?" Olivia considered the question. "Validating," she decided, "but also a bit overwhelming." "That's natural," Harrington assured her. "But if anyone can handle the transition, it's you. You've already proven that." That evening, as Olivia packed up her office in the Tactical Analysis Division, she came across a framed photograph she kept on her desk, a picture of her with Sergeant Wilson and the other Marines from the strike team at Camp Leatherneck. They were standing in front of the captured Drag .50 caliber machine gun, dusty and exhausted but triumphant. It was a reminder of the moment everything had changed, when she had finally been able to demonstrate her true capabilities and begin the journey that had led to today's unexpected promotion. As she carefully wrapped the photo for transport, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Captain Reynolds, now stationed at Camp Pendleton. "Heard about the promotion. Well deserved. The Marines you trained here have been performing exceptionally. Your influence continues to spread." Attached was a picture of Reynolds with a group of young Marines in a training exercise. Among them was a female lieutenant leading a tactical exercise, directing her squad with confident authority. The caption read, "Lieutenant Garcia reminds me of someone I know. The next generation is coming up strong." Olivia smiled. This was perhaps the most meaningful validation. Seeing the path she had helped clear, being traveled by others who might otherwise have been overlooked or underutilized. 2 weeks later, Captain Olivia Reeves reported to the Pentagon for her first day with the Adaptive Tactics Development Team. The massive building was a labyrinth of corridors, offices, and security checkpoints. But Olivia navigated it with the same methodical confidence she applied to all challenges. The team's offices occupied a section of the E-Ring, with windows overlooking the Potomac River. As she entered the main conference room for the initial briefing, she was surprised to find herself in familiar company. Major Davis, her former superior from Camp Leatherneck, was seated at the table, reviewing documents. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable for a moment before breaking into a genuine smile. "Captain Reeves," he said, standing to greet her. "Welcome to the team." "Major Davis," she replied, shaking his hand. "I didn't realize you'd be here." "Transferred in last month," he explained, "after what happened at Leatherneck. The Corps decided my experience might be valuable to this initiative." He gestured for her to take a seat. "We have an interesting group here. Combat veterans, tactical instructors, even some tech specialists working on integration of new battlefield systems." Before Olivia could respond, General Maxwell entered the room, and everyone stood at attention. "As you were," he said, moving to the head of the table. "Welcome to our newest team member, Captain Reeves. Most of you know her reputation, if not her personally. She'll be heading up our training methodology revision subteam." The briefing that followed outlined the ambitious scope of the Adaptive Tactics Initiative, a comprehensive overhaul of Marine Corps tactical training and operational planning designed to create more flexible, responsive forces capable of adapting to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. "The wars of the future won't be won by overwhelming force alone," Maxwell explained. "They'll be won by adaptability, creativity, and the ability to outthink our adversaries. That's what this team is about." As the general assigned specific responsibilities, Olivia was struck by the significance of what they were undertaking. This wasn't just about updating a few training protocols. It was about fundamentally reimagining how Marines prepared for and executed combat operations. "Captain Reeves," Maxwell said, turning to her, "your first task is to develop a pilot program implementing your integrated tactical decision-making methodology. You'll have resources to assemble a testing team at Quantico. I want preliminary results within 3 months." "Yes, sir," Olivia replied, already mentally outlining the requirements for such a program. "One more thing," the general added. "Next week, you'll be presenting your approach at the annual Tactical Development Symposium. It's attended by representatives from all service branches, as well as several allied nations. Your perspective on adaptive tactical training will be our headline presentation. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Tactical Development Symposium was one of the most prestigious military conferences in the country. For a newly promoted captain to deliver the headline presentation was unprecedented. After the briefing concluded, Major Davis approached Olivia as she gathered her materials. "That's quite an assignment for your first week," he observed. "The symposium can be a tough crowd. Lots of traditional thinkers who resist change." "I'm aware," Olivia replied. "I expect significant pushback on several elements of my approach." Davis surprised her with a chuckle. "You handled an insurgent attack and a room full of skeptical Marine officers at Leatherneck. I think you can manage a few resistant colonels at a symposium." His expression grew more serious. "For what it's worth, I was wrong about you, Reeves. I let preconceptions cloud my judgment, and it nearly cost us dearly." The admission was unexpected but appreciated. "Thank you, Major. But that's in the past. We have more important work ahead of us now." "Indeed we do," he agreed. "And I'm glad you're part of this team. We need your perspective." The following week passed in a blur of preparation. Olivia refined her presentation, anticipating potential objections and developing compelling responses. She coordinated with the other team members to ensure her approach aligned with the broader Adaptive Tactics initiative. And she practiced her delivery relentlessly, knowing that her credibility, and by extension the credibility of the entire program, would be judged by her performance. The day of the symposium arrived with clear skies and crisp autumn air. The event was being held at the National Defense University in Washington, D.C., its grand auditorium filled with military officers, defense officials, and international observers. As Olivia waited backstage, reviewing her notes one final time, General Maxwell joined her. "Nervous, Captain?" "Focused, sir," she replied honestly. "There's a lot riding on this presentation." Maxwell nodded. "There is. But remember, you've earned the right to be here. Your ideas are sound, your experience is relevant, and your perspective is valuable precisely because it's different from what many of these people are used to hearing." He glanced out at the audience, now settling into their seats. "Many of them will resist what you're proposing. Change is difficult, especially for institutions as tradition-bound as the military, but change is necessary if we're going to prepare effectively for future conflicts." "I understand, sir." "Good." Maxwell straightened his uniform. "I'll introduce you, then it's your show." He paused, then added, "By the way, there's someone in the audience I think you'll recognize." "Seventh row, center section." Olivia peered out curiously, then felt a surge of emotion. Sitting in the indicated position was Colonel Mitchell, her former commanding officer from Camp Leatherneck. He had been transferred back to the States shortly after her departure, and they had maintained occasional professional contact, but she hadn't expected to see him here. Before she could comment, the symposium moderator was announcing General Maxwell, who strode onto the stage to polite applause. "Distinguished colleagues, honored guests," the general began, "we gather at a pivotal moment in military tactical development. The nature of warfare continues to evolve, demanding that we evolve with it. Today's headline presentation addresses this challenge directly, offering a bold new approach to tactical training and operational planning." He paused, his gaze sweeping the audience. The presenter brings a unique perspective, having demonstrated exceptional tactical acumen under combat conditions in Afghanistan. Her approach integrates traditional Marine Corps values with innovative methodologies designed to create more adaptive, responsive fighting forces. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Captain Olivia Reeves, United States Marine Corps, presenting on Adaptive Tactical Integration, a New Paradigm for Combat Effectiveness. As Olivia walked onto the stage, the applause was respectful but reserved. She could feel the skepticism from portions of the audience, senior officers wondering what a junior captain could possibly teach them about tactical development, traditionalists preparing to resist any suggestion of significant change. She took her position at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, some curious, some doubtful, some openly hostile. Her gaze found Colonel Mitchell, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. "Thank you, General Maxwell," she began, her voice steady and confident. "Distinguished guests, fellow officers, I appreciate the opportunity to share this approach with you today." She deliberately omitted her prepared opening remarks, choosing instead to begin with a story. 6 months ago, I was an administrative officer at Camp Leatherneck in Afghanistan. My primary responsibilities involved processing paperwork, coordinating logistics, and managing the flow of information through the command structure. The audience stirred slightly, confused by this unusual opening. Then one morning, insurgents launched a coordinated attack on the base. Due to a series of circumstances, I found myself behind a Taurus 50 caliber machine gun, defending a position against enemy fighters. She paused, letting the image sink in. That moment represented a failure, not of individual Marines, but of our system. A system that had placed me in an administrative role despite top performance and tactical training. A system that had ignored my capabilities because they didn't fit neatly into established categories. A system that almost deprived the core of skills that proved critical in a moment of crisis. Now she had their attention. This wasn't the technical presentation they had expected. It was a challenge to fundamental assumptions about how military organizations identified and utilized talent. The approach I'm presenting today isn't just about new tactical methodologies, though those are important. It's about creating a system that recognizes and leverages the full spectrum of capabilities within our ranks. A system that values adaptability over rigidity, creative thinking over rote adherence to doctrine, and demonstrated performance over traditional career paths. For the next 45 minutes, Olivia outlined her vision for adaptive tactical integration, a comprehensive approach that combined innovative training methods, flexible operational planning, and a fundamental reimagining of how military organizations identified and developed talent. She supported each element with data from combat operations, training outcomes, and organizational psychology. She acknowledged traditional concerns while demonstrating how her approach addressed them more effectively than conventional methods. And she connected everything back to the core mission, creating more capable, adaptable fighting forces. As she concluded, the auditorium was silent for a moment before erupting in applause. Not the polite, obligatory kind that had greeted her arrival, but genuine, enthusiastic appreciation for what she had presented. The Q&A session that followed was robust, with officers from all service branches engaging with her ideas. Some raised valid concerns that Olivia addressed directly. Others offered suggestions that she incorporated on the spot, demonstrating the very adaptability she advocated. When the session finally ended, General Maxwell returned to the stage. "Thank you, Captain Reeves, for a truly thought-provoking presentation. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need as we prepare for the challenges ahead." As Olivia left the stage, she was immediately surrounded by officers eager to continue the discussion. Among them was a female Army captain who waited patiently until the crowd thinned. "Captain Reeves," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Captain Sarah Donovan, U.S. Army. I just wanted to thank you for what you're doing. Your work is opening doors for officers like me who don't fit the traditional mold." Olivia shook her hand. "I appreciate that, Captain. But this isn't just about creating opportunities for women in the military. It's about ensuring that all talent is recognized and utilized effectively, regardless of gender, background, or career path." "Exactly," Donovan agreed. "That's why it's so important. You're changing the conversation from special accommodations to optimal utilization of available resources. That's a framework everyone can support." Before Olivia could respond, Colonel Mitchell approached. "Captain Reeves," he said warmly, "outstanding presentation. You've come a long way from that administrative office at Leatherneck." "Thank you, sir," Olivia replied, genuinely pleased to see her former commander. "I wouldn't be here without your willingness to look past my official MOS and give me a chance to prove myself." Mitchell shook his head. "I just removed the obstacles. You did the rest yourself." He glanced around at the continuing buzz of conversation in the auditorium. "Your ideas are resonating. I've already heard several colonels discussing how to implement elements of your approach in their commands." "That's encouraging," Olivia said. "Change is never easy, especially in institutions as tradition-bound as the military." "True," Mitchell agreed. "But necessary change always finds a way. Sometimes it just needs the right champion." He checked his watch. "I should go. I have a meeting with the Commandant this afternoon. But I wanted to congratulate you personally. What you're doing matters, Reeves. Don't forget that." As the day concluded, Olivia found herself on the steps of the National Defense University, looking out over the Potomac River as the setting sun painted the Washington skyline in hues of gold and amber. General Maxwell joined her, offering a bottle of water. "Quite a day, Captain," he observed. "Your presentation has generated more discussion than anything I've seen at these symposiums in years." "Thank you, sir. I hope it leads to meaningful action." "It will," Maxwell assured her. "In fact, the Joint Chiefs have already requested a briefing on your adaptive tactical integration model. They're particularly interested in the cross-service applications." Olivia absorbed this news with a mixture of pride and determination. The path ahead would not be easy. Institutional resistance, bureaucratic obstacles, and entrenched thinking would challenge every step of the process. But the potential impact made those challenges worthwhile. "What are you thinking?" Maxwell asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about the administrative lieutenant I was 6 months ago," Olivia replied honestly. "Frustrated, underutilized, but still trying to maintain my skills and contribute where I could." She turned to face the general. "There are others like me throughout the services, sir. Officers and enlisted personnel whose talents don't align with their assigned roles, whose potential is being wasted because they don't fit conventional categories. If this initiative helps identify and properly utilize those individuals, it will have succeeded regardless of what tactical methodologies we implement." Maxwell nodded slowly. "That's precisely why I wanted you on this team, Captain. You understand that this is about more than tactics or training methods. It's about recognizing that in modern warfare, our most valuable resource is the creative, adaptive human mind, and we can't afford to waste a single one." As the last light of day faded from the sky, Olivia considered the journey that had brought her to this moment, from processing paperwork in a forgotten corner of Camp Leatherneck to presenting innovative tactical concepts at a national symposium. The path had been unexpected, challenging, and at times painful, but it had led to something meaningful. "Ready to get back to work?" Maxwell asked. "We have a pilot program to develop." Olivia straightened, feeling the weight of both responsibility and opportunity. "Yes, sir. I'm ready." As they walked back toward the Pentagon, she reflected on the words she had shared with the symposium audience. The future belongs to those who can adapt, who can recognize opportunity in chaos, who can find solutions where others see only problems. Once, she had been dismissed as, quote, "just office staff." Now, she was helping to reshape how the Marine Corps prepared for combat. The transformation wasn't just personal. It represented the potential for institutional change that could benefit countless others facing similar barriers. That, Olivia decided, was worth every obstacle she had overcome and every challenge still to come. Not just for herself, but for all those who would follow the path she was helping to clear. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.